Dr. John Parker. I want to talk to you in our series. I'm going to continue today. I want to talk about another reason that you have signs of hypothyroidism. Even if you're on a replacement hormone like for the thyroid, or if your lab tests are normal, yet you still have the signs and symptoms of having a hypothyroid problem, under functioning. And one of the big reasons I see people have that problem is because they have a cortisol regulation problem. And when they have that cortisol problem, when they have excess cortisol output, your cortisol is released from your adrenal gland, which sits on your kidneys. It releases cortisol and it releases cytokines. And these cytokines, which are chemical messengers, come and communicate to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which are part of the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, and it affects the signaling to your thyroid to work. So what are the reasons people have problems with cortisol? Well, cortisol is released in response to stress, and we all have stresses. So there's different kinds of stresses, and one of the big stressors I see that really drives the cortisol release from your adrenals is blood sugar regulation problems. So many people have blood sugar regulation problems, and there's two types. I'm not talking about just having a problem where I'm diabetic, which is one type of blood sugar, or insulin resistance, which is a precursor to diabetes, which is really rampant in our society. But on the other side of the coin is hypoglycemia. So many people have that problem of reactive hypoglycemia in relationship to what and how they're eating. And so what happens is in between meals they get very shaky, they eat, they get this huge insulin response, it wipes out their sugar levels, and they're back into a hypoglycemic state again. And that's a bad pattern and has to be broken, and I work with people for that. So hypoglycemic swings, sugar regulation problems will definitely cause problems with cortisol levels. Outputs of that cause the cytokines to affect the thyroid. The other thing is people have the other stressor that I'm talking about that causes a problem with the release of cortisols in excessive amount or continually is hidden infections. I run panels looking at gut problems with people all the time, and so many people have an underlying hidden gut infection that's really been affecting their life and their health for a long period of time. I run a test that's a DNA stool profile. It's not your DNA, it's a DNA of the things that are in your gut system. So it looks for DNA for yeast, parasites, bacteria, and just bacteria that shouldn't be there at all. And when I see that with people with the hidden gut infections, when we work to clean those gut infections up, it does several different things. But one of the things it does besides help them healing overall is to help to reduce the response, the stress response for the release of cortisol. Because a lot of people have this stress in their life and they don't even realize it. They just know they have signs and symptoms of having gut problems, which is really big in our society also. And the other thing that we have that causes the cortisol release is we have too much stressors psychologically. It drives our sympathetic nervous system. And that's a biggie because what happens is when they have that happen, that sympathetic stress, it causes huge release of cortisol for a long period of time, and it does two things. It causes the cytokine level to affect the output of the hypothalamic and pituitary axis, driving the thyroid to not work very well, but also it causes people to get depleted in multiple areas, and it causes the adrenal gland itself to go into fatigue. So when I do an adrenal stress index on people, which is a salivary test, and I look at their cortisol levels and I look at their circadian cortisol rhythm to see how it's doing. So what happens is people have a shift in the rhythm, so now they're not sleeping properly, they're not getting up in the morning, they're not feeling rested because their adrenals are shot, and they're attributing it to having a thyroid problem. But also when we look at that, we want to look to see what stage of maladaptation of the adrenals so that we can work on it to fix the adrenals, or we can work on the neuroendocrine system with some nutrition for the stress responders, because if you don't support that part of the pattern, people still are trapped in their cycle. So the condition that we're talking about that leads to hypothyroidism, the chronic release of cortisol and the cytokines. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through some more things in my upcoming sessions here. We have 4 or 5 more things we want to talk about that I address with people as we're looking to see what is the hidden causes of their thyroid, hypothyroidism, and health problems. Thank you.